Introducing What's Next, an analysis of student opinions and careers.
So what are we talking about? There are a multitude of students at CMU who have a lot to offer, but we want to know what they really care about when looking at different companies for full-time and internships.
We'll be looking at conjoint analysis, CX analysis, max diff, and what it all means.
And the story will be told by Team 1 when shit goes great.
This is our team. We're awesome.
Courtney was born with that natural ability to just get data. Detail-oriented and analytical, no software program can slow her down.
Hannah is passionate about connecting with people and loves being able to use visuals to achieve that. She tells stories by making data relatable and meaningful.
Emily is your typical tech-savvy girl who can graph like a mofo. She is meticulous and can make even the most dense data understandable. So why should you listen to us? Well, 179 is the combined number of classes we've taken preparing us for internships and full-time jobs.
8 is how many diverse internship experiences we've had together.
And 43 is how many hours we've spent analyzing research.
So yeah, we're pretty much experts.
I feel like anything can happen, laughing. You take me right back when we were kids. Never thought I'd feel like this. Like when I close my eyes and don't even care if anyone sees me dancing. Like I can fly and don't even think of touching the ground. Like a one-way trip on an aeroplane.
When shit goes great. That's our team name.
If you didn't get that already.
Exactly. So now that you've learned a little bit more about us and our roles in the team, we wanted to talk about really what the research that we're doing today is and why it's so important to us as a group.
So obviously we're all getting ready to enter into the business world. So going through the interviewing process, there's different things that all of us are looking for. So after analyzing this research, there's more clear of what specific students want when entering a new job.
And so not only do we have the results of our research, but we also have us here to just give our little input and on what we think should happen in the future.
Yeah. That's all.
Get ready.
Like when I close my eyes and don't even care if anyone sees me dance.
After surveying CMU logistics students said that wanting $60,000 starting salary and to fit with culture was most important to them when choosing jobs. Whether for full-time or internships, students care most about advancement opportunities, company atmosphere, and culture fit.
Survey data showed CMU students in marketing and logistics who have previously had internship experience, more variety of work, reputation of companies, and culture fit compared to MSU students. Those attributes also drove our NPS score to 15.7%.
As a whole, 59% of students found a need for improvement based on their past internship experiences. Specifically, they found that meaningful work and compensation needed to be improved. Although, when looking at everyone surveyed, atmosphere is important to all, and based on their past experiences, they found it to be a major weakness.
So now we're going to start talking about our project, and this is our agenda. We're going to talk about our objectives, our research methods, the results, and then we're going to sum it all up.
When we're looking at our objectives, there's a lot of different objectives we will be taking a look at throughout this entire project because of all the research that we did. So starting with conjoint analysis, we're going to be looking at how customers make choices. So really how the students are making the choices here. Then we're going to take a look at the most important attributes to the students and the preference levels within each of those attributes.
And then we will look at max diff analysis, which is going to tell us what is the most and least important to students when looking at an internship versus a full-time job.
And then finally, when we go back to CX analysis, we're going to look at what is most important to students in their experience, how companies are performing on these things that they value so much, and then where we can improve in these different areas. In our research, we did a lot of different surveying. We focused on marketing and logistics students at Central Michigan University specifically. 94 students took this survey, and it was taken during the fall semester of 2016.
Students took this survey with a web base, and the data, like we've said, there are multiple surveys that students did take. And to get these students to take this survey, there was extra credit given to them if they completed it.
Then jumping into limitations, there was a lot of survey fatigue. Like Courtney just mentioned, there are a lot of surveys that the students had to take, and because of that, they might have gotten tired a little bit after a while. There was also no comparative data. We're really just focusing on CMU. We talk about MSU a little bit, but it's just a small look into that university, and we don't have a look from the industry perspective either. But despite these limitations, we are very confident in the data that we do have. Now, looking at the results, there are a lot of different types of data that we're going to be looking through. First, choice-based conjoint analysis. Then we're going to be looking at max diff analysis and CX analysis.
So what is choice? When looking at choice analysis, we're going to be looking at attribute importance. As you can see, all the attributes are going to share 100 points, so the more points an attribute has, the more important it is to a student. From that, we can also gain preference levels within a specific attribute. And an average preference will equal 0. If it's below average, it's going to be negative, and if it's above average, it will be positive.
When we first started looking at choice analysis, we started by looking at attribute importance in its entirety, looking at starting salary, fit with company, distance, location, type of firm, and work environment. Based on the data, the highest scoring attribute was starting salary.
What this means is that the most important attribute to students is salary, and then fit with the company.
Exactly.
From attribute importance, we're now going to look deeper into the specific preference levels of each attribute. And since the starting salary was our number one attribute that students ranked, we're going to look at that first. And here it shows that students prefer to start with a salary of $60,000. What this means is that, yes, the highest starting salary is $60,000 for a student, but if it's below $50,000, it is least preferred by any of the students.
The second highest scoring attribute was fit with company, and there we found that, yes, of course, everyone wants to feel valued where they work, and that's what we found here.
The next attribute we looked at was distance needed to travel. The preference levels were preferred to be 1 hour and no more. What this means is that when traveling to work, everyone is fine with driving an hour to work, but flying, no thank you.
We next look at the attribute of location, so where students are looking to live once they get a full-time job. As you can see here, that's suburbs, big city, and rural, and you can see that suburbs was the most popular decision. So where do fresh out of college students want to work? Suburbs. Seriously, you guys?
When logistics students were deciding what type of firm they wanted to work for after college, the most preferred was a 3PL, and manufacturing was also on a top preference for the students, but just not as large as a 3PL was.
When logistics students were deciding what place logistics students wanted to work, the most high preference was 3PL.
The last attribute we looked at was work environment. Students preferred to be in the office with a score of 7, and a road warrior scored -7. What this means is CMU students would rather work in the office than rather be on the road all the time. Overall, looking at the choice analytical data as a whole, we were able to take away these conclusions.
Starting salary was the most important, with culture fit right behind it. And the preference levels for each of those were a starting salary of $60,000, and definitely students wanted to feel like they were a part of the culture of the company that they worked for.
So what does this mean? It means when recruiters are coming to look at students from CMU in logistics, they need to be focusing most on the starting salary and the culture fit of the company. So really pushing those factors and how important they are. So what's max diff? When we're looking at this kind of analysis, we're going to be comparing two different situations. So we'll be looking at full-time situations and internships. Just like it was in choice, attribute importance is still in play. So again, we share 100 points, and the more points there are, the more important that attribute is.
First, we're going to be looking at the internships and the attributes that were most important for students. Ranking the highest was atmosphere at a score of 12, and then followed by advancement, fit, and meaningful work.
As you can see, these are all really close in their ranking. So even though atmosphere is number one, clearly all three, almost four of these are really the top most important ones.
Social, size, and dress are our least important attributes.
Just to let you guys know what these mean too, social is looking at that social environment. So if you go out with friends after work, size means size of the company, and dress is the dress code.
What CMU students want in an internship is to be able to be in an environment that has positive, encouraging atmosphere, advancement opportunities with the ability to grow within the company, and then also be able to fit in with the company both culturally and ethically.
Next, we're going to take a look at full-time and the attribute importance that they have for each of these attributes we have listed. The most important by far, you can see, is advancement, then followed by atmosphere, fit, and meaningful work.
The least important is size, social, and dress.
What this means, when CMU students are looking for a full-time job, they want to be involved in an atmosphere that encourages hard work and growth, and they want to be able to move up within the company.
Okay, now let's take a look at those two side by side. You might have heard this when we were talking about these graphs earlier, but there is a theme in the most and least popular attributes. Atmosphere, fit, and advancement were all extremely popular, both for internships and full-time, along with meaningful work.
The three least important attributes in both of those also were shared, and that's social, size, and dress.
So regardless whether it's a full-time position or an internship, CMU students mainly care about the advancement opportunities, the atmosphere, and then the fit with the culture. At the other end of the spectrum, students do not care about what the size of the company is or what the dress code is.
Looking at our overall max diff data, we found that for interns, atmosphere, advancement, and culture fit were really, really important for them. Looking at full-time, scary.
Fear.
We saw that once again, advancement, atmosphere, and that culture fit was all really, really crucial for us.
So if you put it all together, regardless of an internship or a full-time position, CMU students want to be able to advance in the company, have a great atmosphere to be involved with, and then fit in with the company.
If you're coordinating an internship program or a full-time position program at CMU as a professor, you should be looking for companies that really push atmosphere, really push the advancement opportunities, and that don't really focus on the dress code or the size, because students here don't really care about that. Okay, so that was a lot of data. We're going to take a quick break.
It's time for life lessons from when shit goes great.
AKA a beer break.
Yes. Everyone grab a beer right now.
Like when I close my eyes and don't even care if anyone sees me dancing. Like I can fly and I don't even think of touching the ground. Like a heartbeat skip, like an open page, like a one-way trip on an aeroplane. It's the way that I feel when I'm with you. Brand new.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that quick life lesson from us. But now, we're going to be talking about more data that's super exciting.
And it's CX!
CX! CX! CX! So what is CX, Courtney?
CX is customer experience. Sometimes your biggest competitors aren't always who they seem. The correlation we'll be looking at is between attributes and the NPS scores. Correlation ranges from -1 to 1. The closer to 1, the more that attribute drives the NPS score.
One big part of CX is the NPS score. NPS stands for Net Promoter Score, and that looks at how successful you are in the industry compared to the marketplace.
For example, our NPS score is 15.7, and when compared to other competitors such as Netflix or Sprint, Netflix scores at 39 and Sprint scores at 5. So that ranks us right about in the middle.
So, how do you get an NPS score? Well, we start by looking at a scale of rating. It goes from 0 to 10.
Promoters are 10 and 9, passives are 7 and 8, and detractors are anything below 6.
So when we look at that, we get the NPS score by taking promoters and subtracting the detractors.
For our data, our detractors were 31, the passive score was 21.9, and then the promoters were 46.9.
Now that we know what an NPS score is, we can look at the important factors that are really driving that score. Looking at that, we see that reputation is the highest, followed by meaningful work, and then company fit, and then interesting work.
When looking at our data, we found that the key drivers for our NPS score was the reputation, meaningful work, and culture fit. Although attributes like advancement, location, and size were not important when driving the NPS score.
Our NPS score is 15.7, which is positive, so that means we have more promoters than detractors. So the key drivers for this NPS score is reputation, meaningful work, and culture fit.
Which means that when rating the internships that people had, these were the things that they really recommended about the internships. They really cared about the reputation of the company they worked for. They really thought that the work they did was meaningful, and they liked the culture that they were able to work with.
Also, some things to note about the NPS score and what's driving it. Advancement, location, size, dress, and the stress level of the internship didn't play a role in being a driver of the NPS score.
All right, moving on from NPS scores, still staying in CX, we're going to look at the attribute importance that CMU said they cared about for their internships. When looking at this, we found that the highest ranking was relationship with 8.2, followed by reputation with 7.9, and then fit with 7.8 and atmosphere at 7.7. And Emily, what does this mean?
This means that when looking at the companies and the internships that students had, their experience was most positive and they most cared about the relationship they had with their supervisor, the reputation the company had, and then also how they fit in culturally.
The quote that we found from a student is, "Supervisors should have the time for the interns. None of my supervisors were really available to me."
And although we see that this student might have had a negative experience with their supervisor, we can still see that obviously it was very important to them to have that relationship with their supervisor, which is great to see because that really just reinforces our data that says that relationships with supervisors is the number one most important attribute to these students. Another way to look at data is to compare it to another university. So here we're looking at CMU's attribute importance compared to MSU's.
When comparing these attributes, CMU students cared significantly more about the variety of work, the reputation, and the fit of the company compared to MSU. On the other end of the spectrum, MSU was more focused on the dress code of the company, the onboarding process, and then also the stress level that was involved.
Another way of looking at attribute scores between CMU and MSU is with the performance ratios, and that's calculated with our attribute score divided by their attribute score. What this graph is also really showing well at is the zone of indifference, which you can see is the middle part between the dotted lines. And that's just saying that advancement, location, relationship, and size means that they're insignificant.
What does this mean? When looking at what CMU prefers versus MSU, CMU would like a variety of work, a higher reputation, and then a better fit with the company, while MSU cares a lot more about what they have to wear, the process of onboarding, and how much stress will be involved. The performance ratios identify that CMU students have experienced internships that have a better quality variety of work, a fit with the company, and a reputation, while MSU has had better internships experience with dress code, onboarding, and stress in comparison to CMU.
The next aspect of CX is looking at improvement. First, we asked students, could their internship experience be improved? Based on that question, 59% of students said yes, it could. Then we looked at where it could be improved if they had said yes. The largest percentage was in meaningful work, followed by compensation and then amount of work. Okay, so we know that this graph looks very overwhelming at first, but don't worry, we're going to take you through it piece by piece. So the first thing to know is that the minor to the major is looking at the level of importance this is for students. So if the points are lower, that means that they weren't as important. If they're closer to 1, that means they were more important. Then we're looking from weakness to strength. We're looking at how good students thought companies were at these specific attributes. So if it's closer to the left, they thought they weren't that great at it. If it's closer to the right, they thought that they were.
So if you look at this more in depth with the specific attributes that we have, you can see that reputation, culture fit, and the meaningful work is definitely one of our major strengths. And our minor weakness is definitely atmosphere, and social is right on the border of getting into that major weakness.
When looking at this, atmosphere is a very important one to focus on, because what we see here is that atmosphere is an important attribute and it's seen as a weakness. So students say that companies need to focus on improving their atmosphere.
An anonymous student said they could offer a little more guidance to a career path within the company.
This quote is very meaningful because it connects well to 2 different data points we looked at, both meaningful work and interesting work, which are both in the quadrant of major strength. This lets us know that although it's seen as something that's very important to students, which is reflected again in this quote, and as a strength, it's not a strength for everyone. And because of that, companies can focus on making sure that they do include more information on career paths and how to advance them when recruiting students from CMU.
So we've looked at the data individually, and now we're going to recap, bring it all together, and give a little bit of our input into this project.
Going into this project, we wanted to analyze this data to be able to understand specifically what CMU students are looking for and what they care about when entering the job industry or getting an internship.
So when we looked at all this data, we found a lot of different stuff. As you guys know, we looked at choice, we looked at max diff, and we looked at customer experience information. So we're really coming at this issue in all different angles, and that gave us a really well-rounded view of what it's like to have an internship or to be looking for full-time work when you're at CMU.
So some of the data that we collected, again, students are looking to start a salary with $60,000, and they really want to feel a part of the culture and their work environment. That's just based on the logistics students. But then going forth, we also looked at full-time versus internship opportunities, and students really cared about atmosphere. No, they really cared about advancement.
Yeah. So we're looking for companies that allow opportunities for us to grow and move forward. We don't just want something that pays you well. I mean, obviously that's the first step, but we're looking long term when we're looking at our future, not just our first job out of college. So companies that really have an upper hand with CMU students, because that's something that we really care about.
The next point that we looked at was CMU students who have previously had internships. They really saw that the variety of work was very great. They had a great variety in their internship experience. The reputation of the companies that they worked for was pretty high, and they also felt like they were a part of that culture of their internship.
And then when comparing that CMU past internships to MSU students found their internships to be a lot more focused on the dress code or the stress of the company, and then that just, you could identify the differences between Central and then MSU.
And looking at what Central had a greater experience with, the variety of work, the reputation, and the culture fit, those were also attributes that drove our NPS score.
Yes.
And really contributed to that. And our NPS score ended up being 15.7%. Also, when we were looking at a whole, the 59% of students said that their internship experience could have improved. With that improvement, specifically the meaningful work, compensation, were top of the attributes that they saw improvement opportunities in.
And then looking at everyone who was surveyed throughout this process, we were able to identify that all students found the atmosphere to be very, very important across the board, but then they found it to be an area that was a major weakness, so it needed to be improved.
Definitely room for improvement with atmosphere. So another thing is that when companies are coming and they want to entice CMU students is that they need to, one, make sure that they're working on their atmosphere on their own end, and then really showcasing that when they come here to CMU. So now that we've kind of reviewed all of the big points of the data, really summarizing everything, we wanted to talk about different data points that we really found interesting to us, not only just by researching it and going over the data, but as students in this market. So I know the first thing that I thought was crazy was about the dress code. We saw that no one at CMU, whether they're looking at an internship or full-time, cared about dress code when looking at a company. And I think that's reflective of my opinion, but when you look at just the idea with millennials and what society has really shaped us to look like, dress code is like one of our top things we care about, apparently. So when companies are coming in, they're like, oh, we have a really laid-back dress code and you can wear whatever you want. Like, they're pushing that because they think that millennials care about that. And our data is showing that we don't care at all about dress code. So I think that's a really great point, not only because it is reflective of how we feel, but it also shows that these companies are putting their energies in the wrong attributes. They really should be focusing on that growth, on that future advancement, and on that fit with the culture.
And then going off of that, another interesting point was the advancement within the company. For me, I know that I want to be able to get into a company where there's room to grow.
Yeah.
And then a lot of stereotypes or the trends of new students entering the work field is that the turnover is so high. So being able to cater to an environment where students can move up in the company is something that we're looking for, and that could possibly help reduce that turnover rate.
And the point that I thought was pretty interesting, didn't really deal with any of that data, but with the travel time. I have heard so many millennials say that they want to be able to travel for the job. How cool would that be? But you saw with our data that everyone really wanted to stay pretty close to home. They didn't really want to travel far.
Well, and that was weird too with like the suburbs. Like the number one choice was suburbs. And like as good as that sounds for me, like in 10 years, I really expected everyone to be like big city. Like that's where I want to go. And so the fact that it was like overwhelmingly suburbs, we were all like, what the hell? Like, where did that come from? So it really was interesting too, because it just goes to show, like, you think that you not only know yourselves but your peers very well, and this data showed us a bunch of information that we did not think was the case in the first place at all. Right, so we went over the what with all of the information, what it says, the so what we really thought all this meant and what it meant to us. But the big now what is how moving forward they really take it and make it the most beneficial.
So now that we have made all these conclusions, one of the things that we feel is necessary is that not only that we communicate what we found to companies that are coming in to recruit for CMU students, but then also to leaders who are running the internship program so that they're able to facilitate companies to come in here who can provide these things for students that really want them, and then also make sure that students are getting the best internship or job experience once leaving CMU.
We were thinking about different ways that this could be done, and that would be, again, working with the internship coordinators, making there be a set plan of expectations that companies need to meet or they know ahead of time that are going to be really important to CMU students, so that it goes both ways. We don't want to waste energy here. If it's not something important to them, and they know it's not important to us, we don't want to make it interact. But if that's attributes that they have and that we are really looking for to pair them together right away, it'll make it the most beneficial for everyone. And there's different ways we could do this. It could be through them coming to the career fairs, filling out an online survey about like the attributes they have and kind of matching it up with students, kind of implementing it into Handshake. There's a ton of different options, but the first step really is taking this information and making it useful for all.
Just like
Thank you for putting up with us
Can we do a
all
big hug?
semester.
just randomly like smash heads with you. Bye.
Everyone gave
I feel like a young John Cusack, like making big mistakes. I feel like for the first time in a long time I am not afraid. I feel like a kid. Never thought it'd feel like this. Like when I close my eyes and don't even care if anyone sees me dancing. Like I can fly and I don't even think of touching the ground.
I think
Yeah.
we should definitely say all that, but try to make it as concise as possible.
Yeah.